I remember when I first started my career, the big joke was that the boomers didn't know how to print a PDF or how to convert a Word doc to a PDF or connect to the wireless printers, which were new when we were coming into the workforce. And now, like, we're those people. You know, Gen Z is entering the workforce. And if there is a group of people who feel like you actually slow the project down because you don't know how to work in collaborative workspaces and you're still sending attachments, like these little things, these little perception things can impact the way that people believe you are equipped to lead the next generation. And so regardless of whether we're talking about money and fintech tools specifically, which is what we're going to focus on, this idea of tech literacy being a skill that we need to continue to develop in our lives, it's going to show up in so many parts of our lives.
Yeah. Welcome to the Rich and Regular podcast, where we explore life at the intersection of money. I'm Julien.
And I'm Kiersten. And today we are talking about fintech and a new and free toolkit that we created just for you. But first, I want to give a shout out.
Let's do it.
I want to shout out Rose-Colored Glasses 67329, who left us a comment over on YouTube and said, I truly thank God for your podcast. And while it was awesome to hear you, I really love that you opted to also appear by way of YouTube.
Yeah.
Keep these important facts coming, please. Our community in particular needs them.
I got a lot of love for our YouTube community, man. And so just as a quick reminder, yes, if you've been listening to the podcast, you can listen to it and continue to do that on Apple, Spotify, and I'm sure several other places. But you can also watch it. You can actually see our faces over on YouTube. And so we publish all of the episodes there as well. And we're building a nice community over there. So we appreciate you, Rose-Colored Glasses. I got to figure out what 67329. I know you were born in 1929. I got to figure out what that is. Okay, this particular topic, this is one that is really important. It's important to us individually. We have spoken about it in a number of different ways, but we are now speaking about it and then providing a bit of a resource because we're kind of tired of talking about it on our own. I will also add a little bit of a disclaimer. This is, dare I say, a sensitive topic. It's something whenever you start talking about or alluding to a form of illiteracy, I think people start to get a little sensitive and they interpret that in a negative way. We are not doing that, but we will try our best to be frank and honest and upfront about what we see, what we have heard from people, what we've even experienced on our own and have been able to remedy through a number of different ways. But this is about technology, specifically financial technology, and obviously technological illiteracy plays a role in that. And so we're going to talk about that and then share a really, really cool resource that we have created to help so many people overcome some of the challenges that they may be having when it comes to fintech.
Yeah, when I think about this topic, I think about my mom. And so, you know, even if we poke fun or make a little joke, it's not from a place of disrespect. It's just, you know, sometimes these things are actually funny. But my mom is someone who has always had a little bit of a toe in technology, but, you know, she didn't grow up on it. She's almost 70 now. And so a lot of it is new to her. And she has this habit. She still has this habit where she wants, her urge is to print the internet, right? Like she likes things that are tangible, tacit, that you can touch, that you can fold up and put in your pocket. Like she sort of does GPS, but she also likes to use the way that she knows to be true. It doesn't matter if they, you know, offer up a more traffic optimized way. Like
my mom is the same way. Like she gets in my car, I put in the directions and she like interrupts me as I'm following the instruction. She's like, that's not how you get there.
Yeah, turn left here.
I was like, well, there's a reason why they're telling us to make this turn. And again,
sometimes they're right.
I'm not clowning. I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but she struggles to adopt and use technology in that way as well.
Yeah, I remember your dad is similar because I remember one time he wanted to send you a picture and you asked him to take a screenshot of it.
Oh,
and what he did instead was print the picture and take a picture of the printed picture
and then texted me that
to
picture.
you.
That's right.
Yeah. So there's just like all these little examples that just kind of illustrate where they are less comfortable with technology. But one of the things that kind of like sent me over the edge a little bit was when I was over at Mom's house a couple of weeks ago. I call it Mom's house. Both my parents live there, but it's her house. I was
my dad lives with my mom.
Right, it's her house.
Like, their house? Okay.
But I was over there with Bo, and she told me that she still balances her checkbook by hand. And she spends several hours a week doing this, balancing a checkbook, even though she doesn't write checks. She doesn't write checks anymore, but what she does is she'll use her debit card or credit card. I think it's her debit card throughout the week. She keeps all of her receipts in her wallet, so it's very thick. So it's got all the papers hanging out. She adds them at the end of the week to her register, the little graph thing that used to come with the checks. And then she checks her bank balance to see if the two numbers match. So she's trying to reconcile what the bank says she has in the account versus what her checkbook says, her math.
She's trying to reconcile something that doesn't really need reconciliation.
Right, because the bank is correct. Yeah. Which is what I was trying to explain to her. But she struggles because she has a few bills that are on auto pay. And so her question was like, well, how do I know if it's been paid if I don't write it down? Which is a valid question unless you understand how the mobile app works. And so we took some time. I went through her mobile app. She uses a standard big bank in America. We walked through the functionality. I showed her how to search within a statement balance or transaction list. She didn't realize there was a search capability.
Yeah.
How to create filters so that she can just see withdrawals or deposits, and how to create these text notifications so that she is aware when the balance may be low or when a transaction has come through, and how to throttle those on and off depending on what she needs. And I was telling her, that's how you know. The bank will just tell you. You don't have to keep it up yourself. And it was just eye-opening to her. And I was just like, wow, I guess, when you sign up for a bank account, when she did back in the 80s or the 70s, I don't even know when she opened her bank account at this bank. She's been there 40, 50 years. It didn't exist. No one ever walked you through it. And then when they launch it, it's not like they onboard you through it.
Yeah, it's like, all right, go create an account. Go have at it.
Yeah, it's the only way I look at my money is through the mobile app. And so it was just really eye-opening. And, when I think about this topic, I'm thinking about people like her who just may not know it exists, and they're doing something a longer or harder or more expensive way.
Yeah, and, that's a great segue because I think about my mom as well. And I think, it was mostly me, but we had a bit of a similar experience. My mother is a little older than yours, and the situation with her was that she was preparing to leave her apartment. She'd applied for a new apartment. It was a senior living facility. And as a part of that application process, which is standard, they started asking for financial documents. We needed proof of income. We needed validation or kind of reports from Social Security, et cetera. And my mom had it all written down on a little notepad, and she was ready to go. And I was like, all right, well, let me know if you need anything. And she was like, she asked for the first thing, like, well, I may need to print something. And I'm now at a point where I start to ask a little bit more questions. Well, what do you need? Well, I need to send something over there because I need to fax this. And I was like, well, why would you need that? And so long story short, we needed around 5 different documents. And in the process of trying to get those documents, I realized that we had a bit of a problem on our hands. She'd forgotten her email password.
Yeah.
She then created a new email address and still has access to it because she's connected to it through the mail app on her phone. But she forgot the password for that, which means, she might be missing out on notifications. And she just basically, if or when there's going to be some kind of refresh and she's going to be prompted to enter her email address, now we're going to be in another situation where she can't access her email account, which the new apartment might be wanting to send her notifications, or bills may be coming to that place. And so it's like a big mess.
Yeah.
So a week later, I'd spent maybe a couple of hours with her. I'd maybe spent a couple of hours on my own just trying to see if we can get the account recovered and all this stuff. We solved all of the problems. And then when I was done, I just took a step back and I was like, man, like something that if she was a bit more organized and had a better comfort level with technology would have taken her maybe an hour. You go into socialsecurity.gov, you download the report. You go into your pension account, you download the report. You go to this thing, you download it. She doesn't know how to do it.
Yeah.
And I mean, we even had to have something faxed to a UPS store. And they were like, well, we'll get to it sometime over the next 2 to 3 days. And so then I'm freaking out because I'm like, oh my gosh, there may be sensitive information that's being sent to us from this pension fund that's going to be sitting on the counter at a UPS. And then we have to wait until she gets there. And then you got to pay for it on top of all that, right? Because like, it's not free, you know? And so it's all of these things just because there are people who are still reliant on old and really kind of dangerous ways of doing things. And we can talk and go on and on and on. Even we have had our own experience, and it wasn't as dramatic, but I was triggered a little bit because there are still people that require you to scan things. Not everyone has DocuSign. We don't even have DocuSign, for being honest, but we don't really need it like that. Long story short, there was an app that I normally use to scan items, right? Was it Scannable?
Yeah.
And this time I was getting ready to scan the document and it was like, oh, now you need to have an account. And I was asking you, well, what are your credentials? And you were like, oh, well, just use the Notes app. I didn't realize that you can actually scan just using the Notes app on your iPhone. And then I started thinking about all the other people who, if they didn't know that either, they would have just went ahead and actually paid so that they can go back to using the thing that they know for sure. And so all of these little things were just going on in my head. And I was thinking about like how much technology is changing. And I was thinking about recent conversations that I've had with a friend who I was trying to help her to edit like a 60-second video. And she didn't know how to do it. She just knows that we have a podcast, we be doing videos and stuff. And she was like, I don't do computers. And I couldn't remember the last time I heard somebody say that. I had another family member who was talking about some of the things that her daughter was being asked to do for a project. And she was like, I'm not a techie. And so it just seems to be coming up in all of these little ways more and more often. And obviously there are huge implications, like financial implications, to say the least, to being uncomfortable, to being tech illiterate, to being hesitant, to whatever you want to call it on that spectrum of possibilities that, on the other end is proficient.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that are on that other side, and it's a little concerning. So we want to do our part to help people identify if they're one of those people who may need some help, and then kind of talk about the help that we've done and how we might be able to help you get over that hump.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about our moms and our cousins, our older cousins, but this happens with my friends too across many different age levels. I think when you sign up to not move along with tech, you're also signing up for a life that is very expensive, either in time or money. And
Yes.
both of those are valuable the longer you live, right? If you've ever traveled with someone who doesn't have the mobile app for the airline that they're on, it's a much longer process. You got to wait in line to get your boarding pass. You got to keep up with this piece of paper. You got to make sure that you're listening for the prompts from the loudspeaker because you're not getting a push notification. Like that's just one small example, but it compounds in other areas of their lives.
Yes.
I remember when I first started my career, the big joke was that the boomers didn't know how to print a PDF or how to convert a Word doc to a PDF or connect to the wireless printers, which were new when we were coming into the workforce. And now, like, we're those people. We're the people who can't figure out how to use an app to skip the line in the drive-thru,
Yes.
or the people who don't know or don't value LinkedIn as a major connection point between people who are looking for talent and people who want to be hired. And those types of things, as small as they are, can cost you a job opportunity or can cost you a reputation at work, right? If there is, Gen Z is entering the workforce, and if there is a group of people who feel like you actually slow the project down because you don't know how to work in
Correct.
collaborative workspaces and you're still sending attachments, like these little things, these little perception things can impact the way that people believe you are equipped to lead the next generation. And so regardless of whether we're talking about money and fintech tools specifically, which is what we're going to focus on, this idea of tech literacy being a skill that we need to continue to develop in our lives, it's going to show up in so many parts of our lives.
Yeah, so I started doing some digging and I came across a really interesting study. And I think part of the challenge is that our generation has just become accustomed to a standard pace of innovation. Many of us are making the assumption that that is a locked pace, right? So like something new comes out. If I learn how to use it, I'm good for the next 5 to 7 years.
Right.
And then I can try to find this new way of doing things. And the reality is like that's actually never been the case when it comes to technology. And so this was, if I'm not mistaken, a Harvard Business Review study. And it basically was talking about the pace of change, specifically as it relates to technology and how it has been speeding up over time. So I'll give you the condensed version. You think about innovation like electricity, right? There was a time period where electricity was not widely available. People were using kerosene lamps to light up their homes. This is how streets were lit. This is how buildings were lit, kerosene, right? It took electricity 30 years to hit 75% or to reach 75% adoption within the United States. When you look at that compared to, let's say, cell phones, that took 20 years, right? So there's a slower climb there, about 10-year difference between these major technologies that fundamentally changed our way of life. You look at something a little simpler like dishwashers, right? They're completely standard now. It took dishwashers 25 years to reach 50% of the population, basically to be in 50% of the homes. It took computers 15 years, right? So you think about when computers were first introduced, everybody was saying this was like a specialty product. And within 15 years, it was like, no, like everyone needs to have a computer and you got to learn how to use it. Last example, and actually remember when we first got ours, because it was in the 80s, it took microwaves 10 years to reach 50% adoption. And then when you look at that innovation compared to, let's say, the internet, it took 5 years.
Wow.
Right? 5 years. So all of these things are kind of connected. And I think even if you were to think going forward and you're thinking about this pace, this is why it's so hard, because something new comes out and the expectation is that you jump on board, you learn how to do it, and you think you have 5 years, but you might really only have about 2. And if you, on that second year, decide not to learn about it, guess what? It's kind of too late because now we've moved on to the next thing. And if you wait until 5 years, now you're learning about something from this huge position of disadvantage. You can't even understand the definition because the assumption is that you understood the previous technology and why this new thing is even better. And so I think that's part of the challenge. And so in some ways, it's why I empathize with people, because they aren't really aware of these things. They treat it very passively until something in their life happens. And at that point, like, things can be either like really, really dangerous for them or like really expensive because they didn't innovate along with the pace of technology.
Yeah, I think that's part of what makes it challenging. The other part that makes it challenging is that we're moving away from thinking about things as binary, either this or that, and accepting that most things can be measured on a spectrum, right? This is the heart of our political debates right now, is measuring things on a spectrum and deciding, you know, what's what, right? Literacy is no different. The question isn't a matter of like whether you're literate or not. It's how far away you are from the mean or the average. How far are you from the average level of tech literacy? Yeah. And I don't think many of us have the language or even the experience to describe what it feels like to be left behind. It manifests as confusion or annoyance with this new standard. Why has everybody got self-checkout? Right. What's with the QR codes? What's with ordering from a touch screen? But it can also manifest as doing things and insisting on doing things the harder or more expensive way, and then being upset when other people who have embraced the ease and the pace of change lap us, right? Yeah. It comes out a lot of different ways. I even in our personal business, we can give an example where we produced a series called Money on the Table. And 4 years ago, it was very expensive because it required 3 different cameramen, lots of expensive equipment. I think the first season cost us, I don't even remember how much it cost.
5 figures for sure.
Yeah, tens and tens and tens of thousands of dollars, right? So we're gearing up to do it all over again this time around, and we won't even use any videographers. Or at least that's not our plan. We might subsidize, but we can use AI to create stock footage. We can use AI for editing, for sound design, for graphic design to speed up production. But if we weren't plugged in, what we would do is try to hire a team.
You would go back to that budget that you were relying on, and you would start with that from that place and saying, yeah, well, we know at a minimum it's going to cost this much. And in fact, you might convince yourself that you want to spend more because you want to do it even better.
Correct.
And you don't even realize, well, actually, there's a new way to do these things that you don't have to spend nearly as much money as you used to before. Yes, and the old way has gotten more expensive. Like, you might think that you benefit from the efficiency of, I've worked with people before. It's like, yeah, but the cost of everything has gone up. So to do it the exact
exact same way would be about 40% more expensive in 2024. And I think that oversight, that willingness to look for a different solution, embrace the discomfort that comes with like, oh my God, I'm about to do something different and I'm going to be the one responsible for the outcome. That oversight is happening in people's lives every single day in little and big ways. And that is why we created the Fintech Toolkit, because we wanted to help people think about it. So let's talk about what it is. First of all, it's free. Let's say that again. I'm not asking you to pay for it. It's a free toolkit. It's easy to read. And it's for people that are tech hesitant, right? Or maybe you just have had the privilege of not thinking about it. But it's organized into 3 different parts. There's also a glossary. There's a resource guide to keep you sharp with some additional videos that you can watch to follow up. And it's self-paced, right? You can just work your way through it and apply the stuff whenever you feel like it's relevant in your life.
Yeah. Okay. So let's break it down a little bit, part by part. So part 1 of the toolkit is around tracking and saving your money. And the reason why we created this is because even as we were reflecting on how we used to track and save money 10 years ago, I mean, it almost sounds crazy. Like when we talk about the big argument that we had, and it was like, I pulled out my spreadsheet. It would sound a little weird for me to even try to create a spreadsheet, knowing now that there are so many online dashboards that you used to have, or even when you talk about your mom balancing a checkbook. I mean, there's a version of that I think a lot of people still use today, whether it's creating a spreadsheet or preferring pencil and paper, which, you know, if this is a matter of preference, and this is something that I think helps to create a greater sense of accountability for you and structure, that's perfectly fine. But I do think it's important to leverage technology so that, 1, you can save time, 2, track some of the issues or errors that you might be having. I think we don't talk about how when you create your own systems, there's no trigger to alert you that if you've miscalculated something or done something wrong. Whereas if you're using technology, you'll get a ping, you'll get an indicator, you'll get something wrong. So if you're doing it all on your own, like you are your own kind of accountability tool, and that more often than not
gets tricky.
It can get a little tricky. But the first part is really around tracking and saving, and we're really introducing people to a wider variety of tech tools, things like mobile wallets, virtual cards, shopping trackers, which is beyond me how many people don't use shopping trackers or aren't aware of how they work or why they're important. Instead, we just go shopping. We don't assume or try to price check anything or find other ways or take advantage of anything. It's just going out there spending money, all while missing out on potential opportunities to get the exact same thing while paying a little bit less money.
It's like driving with no traffic, like no GPS.
Right.
It's like driving with no GPS.
Right.
Which I don't go anywhere without my GPS on. I don't care if it's 2 miles away. I'm going to look first to make sure there's not some accident that's blocking my path.
Yeah, you plug it in just to see, because you don't want to.
I might turn it off, but I'm going to look.
Right. Okay, so that is part 1, tracking and saving. The second part is really around automating investing, and this is mostly centered around the rise of Robo Advisors. We've spoken about this before. We have an entire module dedicated to Robo Advisors in our investing class. We, as personal finance enthusiasts and experts, this was one of the topics that really struck our interest. And we share that personal story as to why this particular form of technology really inspired us. But for the life of me, I really do not understand why more people are not embracing the power of robo-advisors. And I have a general understanding as to why they're not doing it. But the point here was to help nudge people a little bit closer there, because everything that we thought was going to happen with respect to robo-advisors is happening. Meanwhile, many people are treating them as still kind of optional.
Experimental.
It is, right? But they're treating it, to your point, as like it's experimental.
It's like, no, we've learned they perform well.
Right. But many of us are actually making a conscious decision to continue to pay more for services and products that we don't absolutely have to. And it's like, wow, you could simplify all of this. Even when you think about some of the questions that people ask or still ask with respect to investing, what should I do? Would you do this or that? And it's like, we actually don't even need to be asking these questions. Mm-hmm. There's technology that can actually help guide us and manage all of these decisions for us. Like, this is unnecessary time and
brain
money
bandwidth
and brain bandwidth being spent that you don't have to, especially if you're uncomfortable doing it, right? But investing is a big, big topic. Robo Advisors are playing a larger role, as they should, in the everyday lives, I think, of investors. So part 2 is really about Robo Advisors and helping more people understand how that technology works, how it eases your days, how it helps keep you on track and makes all of those decisions for you. And is certainly less expensive than going the route of having a traditional in-person financial advisor. And the last part, this is one that I have become particularly passionate about. And I will also say a little bit frustrated, because this is a part of the broader personal finance conversation that so few people are talking about. And this is around protecting your financial life, right? Preventing financial fraud. We are literally living in an age, like the golden era of financial fraud now. And literally, when people say, like, nobody's talking about it, like, nobody is talking about this. Or I should say, not enough people are talking about this. And
they're certainly not talking about it the same way they did, like, the drug era. It's very hard to scare people into protecting their assets the same way that people get scared into locking their doors or, rolling up their windows in certain neighborhoods. There's not a visible element of it. It's all happening kind of electronically through Wi-Fi and other like invisible concepts that people still haven't wrapped their head around. So it's like you can't just start with the crime itself without setting the larger stage of like how Wi-Fi works, how VPNs work. And I think that's part of the reason why a lot of it hasn't gained as much attention as some of the other types of crimes.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate because, I'll pivot for just a moment here. For whatever reason in America, I have seen more documentaries and series being produced of like, husband, murders wife,
I love those.
These crime dramas, and it's like all of these things, but we're not talking nearly enough about sophisticated or even just really quick in like you didn't even see it happening financial fraud. And it could be because journalists don't think that there's a story there, but there's certainly, once you add up the losses, like there's certainly an impact that people are having. And I think what's most concerning is that when these things happen, it discourages people from trying these things altogether, or people shut down and they start doing what they believe is most comfortable for them, even though the thing that they're doing that's most comfortable might actually be leading or contributing to like another fraud going down the future, right? So like they assume that technology is the problem when actually technology is much more a part of the solution than the old way of doing things. Like criminals are looking for people like you who are holding on to the old way of doing things, swiping your card, writing checks,
carrying a bunch of
cash, relying on the mail system to have money sent to you or to send money. Like that's exactly what criminals are doing, and they're making a crap ton of money because so many of us are hesitant or afraid to innovate. So that is how the toolkit is structured. At the very end, we take that a step further. We create an entire glossary, which I think is really helpful for people who just aren't familiar with the language. And I think we do a pretty good job of like making this stuff easily digestible. Like, so this is not a really thick or heavy read. I'm not asking you to read
It's a lot of pictures.
It's a toolkit. It's a guide. It's something simple to help you say, hey, here's how to understand what this is and why it's important. And here's a checklist to kind of help keep you accountable so that you can ensure that when you're done with this thing, if you do all the things that we're asking you to do, you have moved into the present a little bit. And in some ways, if you do all of it, you're kind of positioned to embrace whatever is coming next. Because like it doesn't stop here, right?
Yeah.
Like I would argue that even the toolkit in and of itself, a significant portion of it might be obsolete 3 months from now because there'll be innovations, new technologies, new ways of doing things. But this is really about like helping people get caught up. If you've been like putting this stuff off, like this is an opportunity for you to say, you know what, it's really kind of dangerous for me to be doing this and I don't want to do that any further. Let me stop here, take a breather, understand all of these things in a really condensed way, and then do something about it.
Yes, this is so exciting. So to get the toolkit, there's a link in our show notes on both sites, on YouTube and in the podcast. You just click that link, enter your name, your email address, and it'll come directly to your inbox. If you don't get it in your email, check your spam filter and send us a note if you don't get it at hello@rich&regular, and we'll try to help you troubleshoot how to access it.
And if you are already on our mailing list, then you don't have to do anything because we're automatically going to send it to you. So if you haven't received it, check your spam filter, but you shouldn't have to do anything. This is for people who aren't on the list.
Yes. If you are on our email list, then you should have got a little surprise already in your inbox. And it's this. Spoiler alert. But this is the stuff that just excites me. I'm really excited about this stuff. I've always been into this. Like, I'm a bit of a nerd like my dad. He's a lifelong tech tinkerer. And, even now he's also almost 70. And his current hobby is building a no-code app to document all the things that he's learned about retirement programs like Medicaid and Social Security. And he loves exploring. He loves being curious and trying things. Whereas my mom is the exact opposite. I think one of her biggest fears is that she's actually going to mess something up.
Yeah.
And a lot of people can relate to that. So I want to spend some time just kind of putting the hesitant at ease and talking about, the fears that they may have with embracing fintech or what they may understand about fintech. And it's very natural to feel like you might mess something up. That's valid. There's very rarely a customer service department. There's not a phone number that you can call for questions. There's not necessarily an undo button. And iconography is its own language, right? It's not like it says menu. You have to know that the little hamburger looking thing, if you click that,
that's your menu.
A menu typically comes out. And so honestly, that's challenging, and people may not feel comfortable asking for help, just like people aren't comfortable reading a word that they don't know out loud. It's a very it's uncomfortable. Yeah. I don't know another word for it. And so there's a couple of tactics that I have found that help people get over their fear. The first is going to sound obvious, but it's honestly teaching them or learning how to search on YouTube. If you already know how to search on YouTube, the better thing to do is just send a link, right? But YouTube is an incredible resource for visual directions. If you want to know how to do anything on your phone, whether it's update the privacy settings, I promise you there is a video there already. And if there isn't, you send me a note, because it's a major opportunity if you have a question and it hasn't already been answered on YouTube, right?
In depth
With visuals and screenshots, right? Yeah. So the first is to just learn how to search for whatever you're trying to do on YouTube, get a good glimpse of how it's done. It just kind of takes the pressure off of you, and you don't feel like you're guessing. You have this instruction right there on your phone.
Yeah.
So the second thing I would say to kind of circumvent or at least acknowledge or respect this fear of messing up is to honor it. I do think it's a huge risk to put a bunch of fintech on someone's phone who treats their phone almost like it has a casual relationship with their phone, right? They might lose it all the time, or they don't have a password on it, or they don't have the protections. With those people, or if that's you, you want to start small and then think safety first. So the basic things, enabling Find My iPhone if you have an iPhone, making sure that you have two-factor authorization, getting a password manager to solve for the problems of forgetting the password. We talk about this a little bit in the toolkit, but you really have to learn that it's not just a phone. Before you start this journey, it's not just a phone. It's not just an email. It's not just a password. Each of those things is the equivalent to a key to your house or a window in your bedroom. Whatever works for you to be serious about the privacy and the level of protection that you need to put on your phone, start there, right? If that is the source of the fear, start with just acknowledging like, yeah, you're right. That's valid. So here are some things that you can do to protect yourself to make sure that, if you mess up or if something happens, we at least can control for the device.
Yeah.
I mean, part of the fear of messing up is understanding how fluid technology can be and how, even if you don't have your device in hand, you can correct things in other places or account for things in other places. And so just starting with that baseline knowledge of understanding that these things are all connected and we have mechanisms and safety nets to prevent you from doing anything too big.
Yeah.
That might help them take that first step.
Yeah, there's a lot here. I think one of the other reasons why people continue to hesitate or are fearful of using technology, certainly as it relates to financial fraud, is that they just think it'll never happen to them, right? Mm-hmm. Like they don't know someone that they can speak to that says, yeah, well, this person said that they had $100 taken from them. And I think what people need to know is that like a lot of the people that this happens to, like don't announce that it happened to them, right? They happen to them, they hang their heads low, they don't go back to that place or they don't do those things again. But it's not like they're shouting out to the world and say, hey, I had thousands of dollars taken away from me, so don't eat at this restaurant. You know, like they just don't do it anymore, and they leave it to themselves. And unless you mention that thing specifically and they know you, they're just not going to say it. I think the other layer to that is that there are people who are victims of financial fraud that either have unresolved issues or don't even know that it's happened to them, right?
Yeah.
So what I'm telling you is that it is super prevalent. This is the golden era. Like there are almost 2 to 3 times as much in terms of total losses with respect to financial fraud occurred in 2023 than it did in 2020. Like 2020 was bad, and then it almost doubled by 2022 or something like that. And then it just kept on going in 2023. We'll see where 2024 lands, but all indicators are pointing towards like it's just going to continue to grow. And so
they're getting slick, man.
They're getting slick, and it happens. So I think Hollywood is to blame to some extent. I think everyone thinks that there's some person in a mask and that's looking super shady, you know, in some dark warehouse with like 15 screens. Like it is so quick and automatic. And there's like a whole world like in the dark web where people are buying and selling this information. Like it happens quick, and the work is actually just being done by software. Like it's not all some person with malicious intent trying to do something. And I think that's part of why so many people miss out on it, because they don't even know what the threat looks like.
Yeah, and you're right. It takes many forms. Sometimes it's quick. Sometimes the crime happens. Your information is compromised, but the effect you don't feel for a couple of months or a couple of years. It's not till you go buy a car where you realize like, oh my God, there's already a car somewhere else in my name.
It's
and
not
I
like
would have never known.
Yeah, it's not like there's a broken windshield or you get home and you can see that somebody picked your lock and someone was in your house. Financial fraud today happens so quickly, it's almost invisible or imperceptible, I should say. And so this is part of the reason why we're talking about this, is because people don't really know to be protecting themselves in some ways. They may know 1 or 2 things, but like the list is actually like 15 to-dos long.
Yeah.
And so we share a lot of that in the Financial Technology Toolkit.
You know, oddly enough, I think one of the other concerns or misperceptions about fintech is that it's not secure. You can't even turn on the news these days and not hear a story about another breach, you know, such and such as email addresses, or you get a prompt from Google saying, you know, your password has been compromised and you need to change it.
Yeah.
I get that that happens, and we're still learning a lot in the space. The difference is with fintech, there is a digital footprint and mechanisms in place to stop the spread and to prevent it from happening again. These major corporations and credit unions and bureaus only need to get breached once to figure out what happened and what they need to ask their users to do to protect themselves. And the speed with which you get the prompt or the notification that something has gone wrong is far different. You think about all the times where you give up your physical information, whether it's giving a credit card to a waiter or sending a check in the mail or putting cash in a card and mailing it to another person. There's no tracking mechanism with any of that stuff. There's no notification to know if the person ever received it or if someone else caught it in the middle. There's nothing on the other side. So you've got this imperfect solution with fintech that is getting better all the time. And then you've got this like non-existent solution with the old way. And for me, I'm choosing the imperfect solution. And then I'm adding things like privacy screens to help me along the way. If you don't have a privacy screen, please invest in one. If you are one who, and they're not expensive, they're like 10, maybe $20, depending on where you get it. And you can even have them installed for you at a cell phone booth or at a Batteries Plus or anywhere. But especially if you use the big font, so if you have your screen magnified, people behind you can see exactly what's going on and what you got, and it just makes you more vulnerable. So there are things that you can do to ensure and add that extra layer of security around fintech. There are monitoring services that you can purchase. There are habits and routines that you can build. But don't let the news about breaches and, you know, all of the stuff that you may see, don't let that be the thing that scares you from at least understanding how it works.
Yeah. For me, I think part of the challenge is that we have, unfortunately, an entire generation of people that will get left behind, right? This idea of the world just moving on with this new standard, this new way of doing things while you are still clutching on to the old way. And there are real implications, right? So we're obviously focused on money, but like you have opportunities to save money it doesn't happen the same way that it used to. I remember when I was a kid, one of the ways that you just wanted to scrounge up a quick $1 or $5 or something like that was you would turn in the aluminum cans at the grocery store and you would get like 5 cents a pop, or for 2-liter cans, you could recycle that for a little bit more, or you might find, some change in the couch, like in a cashless society, there's no change in the couch. I used to look forward.
I was wondering where you were going with that.
Well, no, I'm just saying.
I do remember looking in the couch cushions.
You can. I used to look back in my shorts. That used to be my favorite part of the summer. It was like, I would pull out all my summer clothes and then I would look at my shorts, and sure enough, there'd be like a crumpled up dollar or something like that. But in a world where you don't use cash, opportunities to come up with quick cash just don't exist like that.
Yeah.
Or opportunities to save money don't necessarily all rely on you printing out coupons. Like those coupons are now digital now. Or if you have something on your list there that you want to buy, or you've got a shopping list, like there are tools that can prompt you, say, hey, now's the time to buy it. It's 14% off. Act quickly.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or there might be other tools that say, hey, you spent $14 on something. It's now $10.
Go get your price match.
Go back and get your price match
Yeah.
back. Like these are tools that you can use to help keep the cost low, right? But I think so many of us are just relying on our own personal kind of elbow grease form of savvy, as opposed to embracing all of these technological tools that can help you save time and money. And I think that's my biggest concern, because right now it seems optional. It seems like, oh, well, I know those things are available, but I rely and trust on my way of doing things. What you don't realize is that what's happening right now is that they are tolerating your way of doing things. Slowly but surely, like things are moving in a new direction. And if you don't embrace those things now, sooner or later, your way of doing things, your way of going in store to do things, like, and I think a lot of people can admit they're seeing it now, right? Like you're seeing it with more self-checkout. You're seeing it with more order in advance and just pick up. Like the store is here, but the store is not here for you to come inside. The store is just a storage place for you to come get the thing that we assumed you bought online. And so, if you come into the store, you should be preparing to have an uncomfortable and a really long, drawn out experience, because like you came in store, that's on you. And meanwhile, people are sort of starting to experience this inconvenience, because I think it starts with inconvenience, the loss of time. And then it goes from that to things being a little bit more expensive, where it's like, all right, well, if you want to come in store, it's going to cost you more versus if you just bought it online. And then eventually it just becomes unsafe. It's dangerous to be doing things, whether you're shopping or investing. Like, I think we're going to look back on some of these things, and hopefully it's not too far from now where people are going to look and say like, wow, like I can't believe like we were living during this age of financial fraud, or we were living during this age where all of this technology was available, but so many people were willing to do it in a more expensive and in a less efficient and in an unsafe way, because that's what they were familiar with. Like this is our version of whether it's cigarettes, microplastics, you name it, something that we think of as a bit of a relic of the past that we have all moved on from. Too many of us are doing that in our financial lives. And so we're hoping that this toolkit helps to get people caught up so that they can be at least a bit more prepared for today, but certainly better prepared for what we know is coming, because the future is coming whether you like it or not.
You said relics of technology, and my first thought was checks. But my second thought was, you remember how they used to have to run credit card transactions before internet?
Yeah.
You had to like make a copy of it.
With the carbon copy.
You had to make a carbon copy.
Yeah.
Like there was no, and if your name didn't match, they had to like call your bank and get permission for you to use the card. That happened in our lifetime. And so when you're talking about all this stuff from digital wallets to encrypted whatever's, like that is going to happen in our lifetime. And we're going to be the people still insisting like, man, I miss like when they would make a carbon copy of my thing and there was 3 different receipts and you had to, you had to keep up with it. Yeah. So if you are tech hesitant, if you heard some of your own hesitations or
If you don't do computers,
if you're not a computer person, you're not a tech person, I promise you'll get some sort of value out of this guide, even if it's just something small. This is not the kind of thing, like there's no grade. We're not testing you. There's no quiz after it. Even if it's just something small that you can pick up on, I highly encourage you to get the guide, use the link in our show notes, and apply whatever works for your life.
All right. Well, thank you guys for listening to another episode of the Rich and Regular podcast. If you like what you heard, leave us a 5-star rating and review, and we will see you next week.
If you like videos like this and want to see more, make sure you click subscribe and turn on notifications.